Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the very latest in our Mental Health UK How To webinar series. My name is Katie Legg, and I'm the Director of Strategy and Partnerships at Mental Health UK, one of the UK's leading charities when it comes to workplace mental health. Now, we've set up this series of webinars to get really practical and hands-on when it comes to some of the issues that face us when we're talking about mental health in the workplace. And today's session is something that matters so much to us as at Mental Health UK, as you'll hear as we go through today's session, because today we're going to be talking about how to support your colleagues with money problems. And we've got a stellar lineup on our panel today. And I'm going to introduce you to both of our speakers just now. Firstly, I'd like to introduce you to our Associate Director at Mental Health UK, Sarah Murphy, who amongst many other things across the charity is the lead on our award-winning mental health and money advice service. Morning to you, Sarah. How are you doing?
Morning, Katie. I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Yes, not too bad. Thank you. Not too bad. And then secondly, I'm really pleased to say that we've also been joined today by Carleen Dowden, who is the lead for the North Regional Partnerships Manager at the Money and Pension Service. How are you doing, Carleen?
I'm good, thank you. Morning and morning, everyone.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. So we've got an awful lot of content that we have the ability to get through to today. But first, let's just kick off with a little bit of housekeeping. Today's session is going to be recorded. So we will send that out to you at the end of the session today, a little bit later on, for you to watch back again and to share with any of your colleagues. And we will also make sure that we send along with the recording later on today any of the resources or websites that we signpost to as we go on through. There are opportunities for you to ask questions to either of our panelists today, and there's two functions for you to be able to do that. There's either a Q&A function or a chat function. So please do just send those through to us as we're talking, and we will allow plenty of time for that part of the session a little bit later on today. And I think with everything covered there, let's get started then, shall we? And my first question, Sarah, is to you. I'm sure that many people on the call today will resonate and understand how money problems can link to mental health and how that can have an impact. But what's the prevalence of the problem? What is it that we're seeing, and what does it look like?
Yeah. So some research that was done a couple of years ago into the various bits of data that are out there seems to indicate that about 46% of people who might be struggling with their money, who might have problem debt, are also likely to have a mental health problem. So that's like basically half of anyone who's struggling with money is also struggling with their mental health. And the figures are quite similar the other way around as well. So for people who have a mental health problem, it's more likely than not that they are also going to struggle with debts as well. So if you look at that on a population level, we're talking between about 4 and 8 million people who are going to be impacted by both a money problem and a mental health problem.
And what does the challenge sort of look like when that manifests for an individual? What are the things that we might see? Yeah,
I think particularly when you're thinking about somebody in the workplace, if you're struggling with money, then that's pretty stressful. If you don't know if you're going to be able to pay your rent or your mortgage, if you can't pay your council tax, if you're in that situation where you're deciding whether you're going to put the heating on during winter or you're going to eat, then that is going to play on your mind. So if you're in a workplace setting, then it's no surprise that someone's probably going to be distracted. They're probably not going to be focused on the task at hand. They may be withdrawn, they may be quite defensive. And those are all signs actually that someone is struggling with their mental health. So it can really impact on people in a workplace setting. And what you might find that, you may have heard that really referred to as presenteeism. So somebody is there at work, but perhaps they're not well enough to be at work. And it could be that an underlying cause of that is a money problem.
Okay. And presumably the pandemic has had quite an impact on the number of people who are experiencing some of these challenges, and also there's some of the nuances that sit within that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things that we're seeing really. So people who've perhaps been on furlough may or may not, depending on what a company's policy was, have been getting their full wage. So they've been having to manage during this period, potentially on a reduced income, but chances are their outgoings are the same, if not a bit more. If they're having to stay at home, they're probably going to be using more electricity than they would have done before. So there could be people who are still employed, and you as an employer might think, well, I'm paying their wages, so what's the issue here? But actually you don't know the impact of a potential reduced wage or an increase in outgoings. The other issue is you may not know the makeup of that person's household. So although your employee may still have a job, many people have lost their jobs, sadly, because of COVID. The impact on the hospitality industry in particular, travel and tourism. So whereas before you may have had an employee where they had 2 wages coming into a household, it could well be the case that there's now just the one. And that's also going to have an impact on their ability to maintain their regular monthly outgoings.
And Carleen, a question for you. Why is this so important for employers?
So yeah, I think, the business case for supporting employee financial well-being is absolutely compelling. Sarah's already alluded to some of the kind of stats, but almost 8 in 10 UK employees take their money worries to work, and money worries are the biggest cause of stress for employees in the UK. Approximately 4.2 million working days are lost in absences due to the lack of financial well-being, and that's the equivalent of £626 million in lost output. This alongside 1.56 billion is the estimated cost of low financial well-being each year as a result of absenteeism, and more importantly, what Sarah alluded to there, what we know as presenteeism, where actually, that's an important point, the employee is there, kind of there in physical presence, but actually might not be in a good enough state to be there, which can result on their kind of work and then having a knock-on effect in productivity and the business more widely. But despite all this, actually a latest reward survey from the CIPD found that less than half employees have a financial wellbeing policy in place. And I think what's important to bear in mind is it goes wider than that business case as well. Employers have that kind of moral, ethical responsibility for employees' financial well-being. If we consider the amount of time that people spend at work, many spend more time at work than they actually do at home. Really, it's a kind of everybody's responsibility to support people's financial well-being. Unfortunately, what we're certainly seeing is an increase in the amount of people experiencing financial difficulties as an impact of COVID. And Sarah mentioned some of those, maybe actually that your employees are not on furlough, they're on their standard pay that they have been throughout the pandemic, and they're in the fortunate position of still being employed, but actually, if they're relying on 2 incomes and their partner's on furlough, or their partner's lost their job, or children within the household, that can impact significantly. And I think also why what we're seeing is certainly an increase in the amount of employers who are interested in supporting financial well-being. And I think one of the reasons behind that is that actually many businesses are currently not in the position to give pay rises or other monetary benefits because of the situation their own business is in. So actually by providing support around financial well-being, it's almost at that support without having to kind of invest a great deal of money within that.
And Sarah, was there anything that you wanted to add to that?
I think Carleen's covered it really well. I think there's obviously a lot of the work that we do at Mental Health UK is focusing on mental health and well-being. But the two are just so inextricably linked. So if an organisation, there really is a duty of care, I think, and in some cases, in terms of Health and Safety at Work Act, there's a legal duty on employers to be looking after the mental health and well-being of their staff. But because the two are so inextricably linked, can you truly be looking after the mental health and well-being of your staff if you're not also having a focus on their financial well-being as well? If financial issues are the underlying cause of some stress, even if that stress isn't in the workplace, if it's outside of the workplace, people are bringing themselves to work. You can't just shut that door and separate it off. We want to encourage people to bring their whole selves to work. That's the kind of culture, we would say is an important culture to have in the workplace. There's a lot of focus on psychological safety at the moment. And for me, that is very much about making sure people can bring their whole selves to work. So if you're bringing your whole selves to work and yourself has got, a monetary problem, then really I think it's on the employer to be able to support with both of those issues.
So not just a moral responsibility, but actually that psychological safety and that responsibility for the mental health and well-being for your staff at work really does intersect with the conversation that we're having today. Colleen, what are we seeing employers doing just now in this space?
So as I already mentioned, we're actually seeing a growing recognition from employers of the importance and their interest in supporting financial well-being. I think what's really important to bear in mind is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to this. And, I'm not sure of everyone who's on the call, but I imagine there are lots of different organisations, possibly from SMEs to big corporates, etc. And what financial well-being looks like in your organisation might look very different to somebody else. But I think the key message to take away actually is that any business can get involved with financial well-being, regardless of kind of scale. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a large drain on resources and expertise. So what we're seeing is the kind of sensible way to approach this is building financial well-being into other broad organisational policies and practice. So just like Sarah's mentioned, some of those other legal duties and responsibilities, how does it sit within them? Because it's intrinsically linked. So actually it makes sense to adopt that holistic approach rather than just addressing it separately. And actually that's a really clever way of engaging employees, because actually what we find is businesses might have the most sound, brilliant financial well-being program in place, but actually employees have a resistance to engage with that, because we all know that similar to people experiencing mental health issues, they feel there's a stigma attached to that and it's not easy to talk about money. So by embedding it in other policies, it kind of contextualizes it a little bit, makes it less abstract, and also allows people to kind of open up more freely about talking about money. What we're seeing many employers do is drawing on the wealth of free information and resources. So there's so much out there. So for example, the CIPD have a guide to developing financial wellbeing in the workplace. You don't even need to be a CIPD member. They're free to download on their website. And that's a really good starting point about developing a kind of program and policy. We've got our own Money and Pension Service employer page, and we'll share links with these later on that we can send out. And this has got a wealth of ideas and data to support the business case. So if you're a business out there thinking, we'd really like to get involved with this, but actually we've either got a small HR team or we don't have anyone that's got expertise on that, there are a wealth of information resources available there which are free of charge. And many employers get started by surveying their staff, and again these surveys, we've got them on our website, to find out the picture. What is it that's probleming people have got problems with at the moment, and then starting to develop their program around that based on the needs of individuals within the organization. And I think more broadly, what people are doing is trying to create a work culture where people can be comfortable about talking about money, and really, having financial wellbeing ambassadors at every level, kind of from board down. In terms of other practical things people are doing is inviting in experts, such as pension providers, independent financial advisors, their local bank, and doing sessions where employees attend and can learn more about different products and services. Some larger organisations with kind of EAP programs and things, some of them provide confidential counselling services where employees can discuss their financial situations, and often, how they're embedded into other things that might then be impacting their performance at work. And also building financial well-being into things like inductions, HR policies, and also more importantly around life events. Often we see people presenting with financial difficulties at specific times, whether it be buying a home, a bereavement, a relationship breakdown. All these kind of pivotal moments in their life can often impact on their finances. So how can you build that into that journey with employees? And another good sound practical way is adding financial wellbeing section onto your intranet. And we've got a number of tools and calculators, for example, that can sit on there, and if they're, a budget planner, a retirement planner, God forbid, a redundancy calculator planner, all those kind of things. And then people, it's almost like self-service. People can access it. They don't actually even need to have that conversation about finance, which some people are happy to do, but they can access those tools themselves. And then other things, we're seeing a big growth in the likes of employers partnering up with other organisations such as credit unions, where they have things like payroll savings. So if you haven't heard of this, we've actually just done a big piece of research on this, and the evaluation was very promising. And the idea of payroll savings is that you partner with a credit union. This service is completely free for businesses. They don't pay anything, and as part of the payroll experience, a part of that money goes to the credit union and the employee can save on a regular basis. Other kind of things that many employers are looking into currently are things like salary advance schemes. So this is whereby a proportion of the employee salary can be paid in advance to them to cover possibly unexpected costs, or where they've got a bit of a fluctuation in expenditure. So for example, I don't know, it might be that they've got their children's birthday coming up and they're doing something a little bit special. Now, what I would say on salary advance schemes is, as an employer, you need to take responsibility for looking at these schemes in detail, getting all the relevant information and seeing whether that's suitable for your employees. And what I would say is that salary advance schemes are by no means a long-term solution. If they're used to their best, it is really a short-term solution once in a while, where employees might draw down on this, and not to be seen as a kind of something that they're regularly accessing. Yeah, and yeah, so I think there's
jump in there if you don't mind, Colin, because I think it's really interesting what you just said about the stigma around talking about money, because if we look at it also with that mental health angle, you know, that there's been great strides in the mental health sort of world about talking about mental health. Certainly when I started in the mental health sector about 12 years ago, you know, we just wouldn't have been having this conversation because it was just too awkward, and nobody was talking about mental health at that point. So massive strides forward in terms of people recognising that everyone does have mental health, and sometimes it can be good and sometimes it can be bad. But there is still a job of work to do. There's still a stigma about people feeling that they can open up about how they're feeling, particularly in the workplace, because they may not know how that's going to be responded to. There may be a culture there where, you know, there's a sense that if you're struggling with your mental health, you might be weak. You know, we hear that quite a lot. So you've got this stigma around mental health, but then also, and I don't know whether this is, it would be great to do some research on this actually around whether this is just a British thing, because I have heard from other people that, you know, perhaps on the continent, it's not so much of an issue, but we just seem to not like to talk about money. So if you are struggling with your mental health, and that might be because of your money problem, or you're having a money problem and it's starting to impact on how you feel, it's like a double whammy really of stigma and shame in terms of those feelings and being in that situation, which can be a real barrier to accessing any kind of support. And having run and worked in advice services for many, many years, you know, the biggest conundrum for the advice sector is how can you reach people really before they get into a terrible crisis situation. You're kind of reliant on them coming to you and recognizing that they're getting into a problem, because it's very hard for the advice sector to sort of be, you know, roaming around the country asking people, are you almost in a debt situation? But people don't recognize that they're getting into difficulties before they're in that kind of crisis situation. So I think employers can play a key role really, because many people are in work. So the advice sector doesn't need to roam around, you know, people are in work, and the employer can ask and create that environment. And like Colin said, provide those tools and resources so that people can hopefully understand, manage their finances and their mental health before they reach a crisis point. But I think the stigma issue is a key one, and trying to create that culture where it's okay to talk about these things is really important. And also, I'm glad that you mentioned about the payroll savings, Colleen, as well, because again, having worked in the advice sector, we do see people when they're in the crisis point. So they're already in a debt situation and their mental health is already being affected by the time we're helping them. And when we sort of track back and we try to find out what's been going on, often it can just be, you know, a small domino sort of effect really, but that initial trigger for the problem can sometimes be what we would call an income shock. So it might be that somebody's passed away and therefore there was 2 incomes coming in and now there's just one. It might be a redundancy situation. It might be ill health. It might be, in many cases, something has broken down, a car, which has meant then you can't get to work, or a washing machine, and that can really impact on people. So having a little buffer, having a little savings buffer can be so important in those situations where actually it doesn't become a choice between paying your rent and getting to work. You've got that little buffer to be able to see you through these bumps in the road. So payroll savings, like Colin said, the research that they did is a brilliant option there. And saving with reputable organisations like a credit union, where it doesn't have to be hundreds and thousands of pounds every month, just a few pounds every month can build up a pot there, and that can hopefully prevent people getting into this both debt crisis and mental health crisis. And I also just wanted to pick up on your points on the salary advance schemes, because any kind of payday loans, which are now different to salary advances, we do find that people get into a real pickle with them. And ultimately with a salary advance, what's going to happen is that money will come off your next few salaries, the money that you've borrowed. So the money that you're actually getting in your bank account each month is going to be less than it normally is, but you've still got your same bills and whatnot to pay at the other end. So it is important to really think through whether that is the best option for you or for your employee before diving in, because what we don't want is that someone to be in a situation where their salary then doesn't allow them to cover their essential bills every month. So like Colin said, it can be great for a one-off, but it's not really a long-term solution for someone who might be struggling, and we'd really encourage people to get more holistic sort of money advice or debt advice if that is the situation.
So it sounds to me in those instances that education is absolutely critical to sit alongside an intervention of that nature where a person is having a sort of a differentiator in the way that their income is being treated.
Yeah, and definitely, and for that kind of preventative to stop it reoccurring, because as Sarah says, it's one event, something as simple as your washing machine breaking can then spiral people into debt very quickly, especially if they take a payday loan to get new washing machines. It's an essential item. They're already, their kind of income and expenditure, one's higher than the other, so they're not able to make those payments. And also, this is where people tend to possibly get involved with illegal money lending, such as loan sharks, and those situations then make it very, very difficult for them to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel and get out of the debt issues that they have.
Absolutely. This is fascinating conversation, and we're starting to get some great questions through to us here. I think one of the key takeaways that I've taken from this already is it's not just about the what, but it's about the how as well. And that's the real art when we talk about the double stigma that you've mentioned there, Sarah, and the difficulty in challenges and worry about talking about money, particularly in the workplace, Carleen, that it's both of those elements brought together. It doesn't need to be an overt campaign. Some things can sit a little bit more subtly and have great effect. Now, we like these webinars to be really practical. We like our guests to be able to leave from these sessions with some things that they can take away and do as soon as they get the opportunity to back in their workplaces. And so starting with yourself, Carleen, what does the Money and Pension Service have in terms of resources that can be used by any of our guests today?
So the Money and Pension Service, we are actually an arm's length organisation of DWP, and we work closely with the Treasury, and we're the biggest single funder of debt advice in the United Kingdom. So we work with a number of partners, such as Rethink, Step Change, Citizens Advice Bureau, etc., to deliver a number of different services on our behalf. But our kind of consumer-facing brand, which is what you guys are probably going to be interested in supporting your employees, is Money Helper. Now, this has just recently gone through a rebrand, so you may have been familiar with our legacy brands, which were the Money Advice Service, the Pension Advisory Service, and Pension Wise. So if you've signposted any of those services currently, that's all now being changed. You'll be automatically redirected to Money Helper. And basically, Money Helper is a free and independent money and pension service for any anybody in the United Kingdom to access. And it takes two main shapes really. One is our digital offer. So on the Money Helper website, there are a number of tools and resources. So some of them I mentioned earlier, all types of calculators. There's lots of articles on there, videos, etc. And what I will say is all of those tools and calculators can be syndicated onto your own websites or portals, completely free of charge, no license agreement. So if anyone's interested, do get in touch and we can arrange that. And then also on the Money Helper website is the telephone numbers and web chat numbers, etc., for our money advice service, and that is free for anyone to call up, and that is about anything. So it could be, you know, I'm going on maternity, I'm not sure how much I'm entitled to or how I'm going to manage with childcare costs when I get back, right through to I've got severe debt issues, I don't know where to turn, I'm thinking of taking my own life, you know, worst case scenario. And what happens there on that call, we it's not regulated advice. So in the instance, the latter example that I gave there, where someone's got significant issues in debt, they would then be referred to the appropriate organisations to support them. So regulated debt advice, mental health charities, etc., to help them through that. So really, if you, and I'm not just saying this because I work for them, if you are an employer, it really should be a starting point for you. There's draw on what's there, it's free. And what I should say as well, it's constantly updated because, you know, we've got a COVID section, for example, and we know how many times things have changed on credit card holidays, mortgage holidays, furlough, etc. That is all regularly updated by ourselves. So yeah, please have a look. And also, more importantly, if you want any support, so we're a national organisation. I cover specifically the North East, but oversee the North. But we have got partnership managers in all of the regions and in Ireland, Scotland and Wales. So on our Money and Pension Service website, you can access your partnership manager, get in touch with them, and they can support on helping you find your way around developing your strategy and things for you as a business.
Fantastic. Absolutely okay on this webinar to do a shameless plug. That's what we want. We want lots of tools and resources shared out. So very happy for that. And now I'm going to hand over the opportunity for Sarah to do much to say. Sarah, tell us about this amazing mental health and money advice service and all things that Mental Health UK can support employers with when it comes to money problems.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I mean, in an odd sort of way, I would also back up Colleen's suggestion around employers going and having a look at the Money Helper website and accessing the resources from Money and Pension Service, because they are free, and there is no there's no catch to that. But like Colleen said, if somebody does ring the Money Advice Service, which is the helpline that they run, and they are struggling with debt and also their mental health, then actually that service can refer into our mental health and money advice service. So our mental health and money advice service is also an online resource. It's a website which has got a huge array of information about money matters, but very much through a mental health lens. So there's a big section on any benefits that you might be able to claim because you are struggling with your mental health. And what a lot of people don't realise is you can be working full time, but you can still claim a benefit called personal independence payment if you do have a mental health problem which impacts on your ability to sort of manage day to day. And that's actually our most popular section on the website. But there's a whole host of other information about budgeting if you're struggling with your mental health, negotiating with creditors if you do have debts, and either it's impacting on your mental health or the reason you got into debt was because of symptoms perhaps of your mental health problem. So massive amount of information on our website, which is mentalhealthandmoneyadvice.org. And like Carly mentioned, we actually syndicate some of their tools. So there's a budget planner on there, there's a universal credit planner on there, which we've syndicated, we've borrowed, basically we've pulled through from Money Helper. But then also our advice service is where people get to speak to a real human, and they will explore their situation both from a mental health and a money perspective. And we are able to give regulated debt advice, so we can provide debt advice, welfare benefits advice, and also signpost and support people in relation to what they should be getting for their mental health support as well. So that service is, we do accept referrals. People can't come to us directly, but if an employer wanted to talk to us about setting up a direct referral arrangement, then please do get in touch. And the other thing that we're particularly proud of that we've developed, because we developed it with people who have got experience of both a mental health and a money problem. So we've co-produced this resource, is our mental health and money toolkit. And we actually worked alongside, again, Money and Pension Service to develop this, and also the National Academy for Social Prescribers. And what this is, like I mentioned before, this kind of double whammy of stigma. What people told us was one of the biggest barriers in relation to getting any help was this kind of feeling of shame. So the toolkit goes through a number of cognitive behavioural therapy techniques to try to build up self-esteem and get people into a position where they can take that first step in getting help. And there are also a number of techniques in there, because avoidance is a big one. You know, you get a bill through, can't pay it, you pop it in the drawer, you feel better, but actually it doesn't resolve the situation. So there's also some techniques in there as to how to kind of break this avoidance cycle, as well as some basic money guidance tips as well. So there's a few different resources from us on the money side of things. Then on the mental health side of things, you know, as employers, we do a number of interventions and training courses to try to get to that culture that I was talking about, where you do have a culture where it's okay not to be okay, and you can bring your whole self to work. And I think what's really tricky for managers is, you know, if they might have an inkling that a staff member in their team isn't okay, and whether that's because they've got a money problem or something else that's kind of causing it, how do they have that conversation? How can you have what we call a supportive conversation with a staff member, which allows them to open up, tell you what's going on, and then you listen, but also can get them to the right sources of support. So whether that is to the money helper or whether it's to your own employee assistance programme, having the confidence and skills to have that conversation can be a real barrier. So, you know, a number of training interventions to really get people to that place where they feel comfortable in doing that as well.
Great. This is all sounding absolutely incredible. So much it's readily available to any employer out there. And just to hopefully answer your question, Jamie, and as a reminder for everybody listening, we will send out plenty of links to the things that we're talking about today, so that you can crack on and start using some of these things immediately. Carleen, I've just got one more question for you before we move on to some of the great questions that we've had from our audience today. And that's about long-term financial planning. What's the role of businesses and employers in terms of supporting their staff in that regard?
Yes, this is a really good question. You know, we know that less than half of adults in the UK don't feel they have the relevant information and knowledge to plan for the future, which is really quite frightening. And also the impact of COVID has kind of messed up many people's retirement plans, or they've had to draw down earlier on pension funds, etc., because they've lost incomes. So I think if there's a message there for employees, it's really encouraging staff to review their pensions plans as early as possible. So, you know, whether you have your own pension scheme and you have someone come in and talk to employees, or just signposting them to the likes of the Money Advice Service pension service, which actually for over 50s, any over 50 can get a free financial regulated appointment with ourselves, where they can discuss and go through their pension options. And another thing, a term being bandied around at the moment, is something called the midlife MOT. And lots of financial service organisations offer these. Not that we endorse anything, but Aviva, for example, have a really good free tool, and it's the midlife MOT, and it asks people a series of questions about their current situation to help them establish their current position, and then what they need to be able to do to retire at the age they want to, on the income they want to. So what I would say is, if you're an employer out there, find out who can provide these kind of talks in-house, maybe from your own pension provider, but really encouraging people. You know, it might be something that's raised at an annual review or whatever it is, thinking about plans for the future. The key really is the earlier the better. And I think this is particularly true for young people who might, you know, it's their first job, etc. The last thing on their mind is certainly planning for the future. But actually we know, and the stats show that, you know, along with interest accumulation, etc., the earlier you start, the better position you're going to be later down the line. So to get that messaging out that actually it's not just for the over 50s to consider that might be the midlife MOT, but by then we want them to be in a good position so that they do have options options available to them. We have a number of free guides on pension guides as well, and you can order up to 2,000 of those for your organisation completely free of charge. They can be accessed from our website. So again, that's something physically to give out to employees, but again, signpost them to the Money Helper website, and from there they'll be able to get free pensions advice also.
Fabulous, sounds great, and that leads us very nicely into some of the questions that we've had come through to us today. So thank you for everyone who's been sending those in. It takes us actually back to your point just now, Colleen, about younger people and the point around starting financial planning earlier. Should employers do more to promote financial wellbeing for their junior colleagues, and is there anything specific that they should be doing for them? I'll ask you, Colleen, and Sarah, if there's anything you want to add, please just do.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and often I think sometimes it's those younger employees that need more support. In particular, I'm thinking here around apprentices. You know, you leave school at 16. If you're lucky enough to get an apprenticeship, you go into an apprenticeship, but you have no idea, for example, young people, surprise them that they don't realise they don't get all of their money at the end of the month, that they have to pay tax and that they have to pay national insurance. You know, we do a lot. We've got resources on our website, things like reading your own pay slip. And often young people are kind of at that stage in their life where they're needing to make big investments, whether it be, you know, we hear all the time in the press how difficult it is to get on housing ladder, etc. So arguably it's even more important for that kind of younger group to have some form of financial education to allow them to make better choices. And I think we're also living in an era of kind of, you know, buy now, pay later, you know, things like Klarna, payday loans, where young people see things, they want them. All they have to do is click at the end on their basket and they bought something and then they have to pay for it. They miss a payment on that. And then all of a sudden the interest rate goes up to a ridiculous amount. So you're absolutely, young people should not be kind of left out of anything. It's more important than ever.
Yeah, and I think if we think about it in terms of that whole person approach, you know, some of these people, this will be the first job that they've had, particularly if it's an apprenticeship or a graduate, you know, scheme or training program. There are some big transitions going on for those young people at that point in their life. You know, they've just left the education system. They might have just left home for the first time. And we know that transitional points are key points where it can then impact on your mental health. There's a lot of stress there, possibly some anxiety, and many of them just won't have been taught how to budget. Colleen mentioned about reading a pay slip, you know, understanding about direct debits, the different kind of arrangements that you are signing up to with your mobile phone or whatever it might be, hire purchase agreements, you know, what do they actually mean? And you know, this kind of stuff isn't taught at school. I think that's changing in some of the nations, but you know, not everybody knows this stuff. And I think when you're an adult and you're the manager or, you know, you're the employer, you can just take it for granted because you know how to do it and it seems obvious. But you know, just having try to put yourself in their shoes, it's probably quite a stressful time. They've started a new job or an apprenticeship or whatever it might be, and they might just not know how to budget and how to do these things. So, you know, you've got an opportunity there really to educate them in that side of things, whether you feel it's your role or not. My view is that it's going to have that preventative impact, where if you can get somebody to a position where they can feel comfortable managing their own money, then hopefully, you know, they're not going to end up in that crisis point and you're not going to be dealing with the issues further down the line when they're then stressed about their money problems.
Great, thank you. Couple more questions coming through here. The next one is whether, if you know that somebody is going through a major life transition, a marriage or a death, for example, you should proactively approach them as an employer to help them with their financial circumstances or offer advice. Maybe, Colleen, you look like you were primed for that one.
Yeah, you know, I think this comes down to kind of, you know, you as employers are in the best position to know about your employees and who the best person is to raise the issue, because it is sensitive. You know, some people do not like talking about anything personal, whether it be money, mental health, or anything else indeed. And I think it really, you know, the answer I believe should be yes, you need to speak to them, but it's how you do that's the most important bit. You know, that needs to be done privately, in confidence. You need to have that trust with that employee to be able, because actually, if you don't have that trust and you don't have that relationship, it's very, very unlikely that they're going to open up to things such personal issues such as money or mental health. So I think it's about possibly, you know, what support and training do you provide for, I don't know, managers or colleagues that are managing these people, team leaders, etc., to have the expertise and the empathy and the emotional intelligence to kind of tackle this sensitively. We do actually have something called the Money Guiders framework, and it's for it's targeted people who talk about money in their day-to-day job with employees, but it's not their area of expertise, and it gives some really good prompts around what those conversations look like. So that can also be downloaded from our site. So yes, I think, you know, what is it, a problem shared is a problem halved, etc. I think it's that all thing. Yes, it should be approached, but it needs to be done in the right way.
Yeah, and I would agree, Colleen. I think it's about, again, getting that culture right and having the managers feel confident in their skills to be able to have that conversation. What we get asked a lot is, but, you know, I'm a manager in X, or, you know, I do Y. I'm not a counsellor. I'm not a money advisor. I'm not a debt advisor. I'm not a financial advisor. Yeah, exactly, you're not. But you are a human being. And just being able to have that conversation, at least acknowledge that you're aware that something is going on, give that person the opportunity to be able to talk to you about it. Like Colin said, they might not want to, but it's about just letting them know that there's that there is a space if they want to talk about it. And you're not there to try to fix their problem. But if you can understand what the problems are and how they're feeling about it, then what you've hopefully got in your toolbox are a number of organisations to hand who can help them with their problem, whether that's their money problem, whether it's grief counselling, you know, whether it's relationship issues, and can you signpost somebody to relate, for example. So hopefully you've got some numbers in your toolbox to be able to share. But also, what can you do in a workplace environment? Does somebody need to have amended duties for a period if they're going through a difficult time? Do they need to have time off work? Do you have a policy which they might not have known about, which allows them, compassionate leave or whatever it might be? So I think it's about creating that environment, letting them know that they can open up to you, not trying to fix, but trying to support and get somebody to the help that they need.
Really sound practical advice. I'm sure that will give a lot of confidence to people who have joined us today. Perhaps one for yourself, Sarah. Do we have any advice for the self-employed community?
Well, I think Colleen's probably got some interesting things to say there as well. But I think, yeah, self-employed, it's again, this issue of money and mental health is just so inextricably linked if you're self-employed, because I think, the money that you have coming in is just all on your shoulders. That is stressful. You've got to think about your own family, but also potentially, people that you employ as well. So I think being up to speed, if you like, with your own finances, and taking any free resources that you can about managing your business income, and then also your personal income and expenditure is key. You may not, depends on the size of your business, obviously, and how profitable it's been, but you don't have to spend a whole massive amount of money on either financial wellbeing tools or mental health tools, because there's charities out there which provide information for free, which you can tap into and share with your colleagues, with your staff. And there's potentially things that are included in your insurance products, which might give you and your employees access to things like an employee assistance program. So I think, look into your insurance policy is actually one piece of advice, and see what's out there for free as another piece of advice. But Colleen, have you got anything within Money Helper?
Yeah, just to echo, those kind of small business owners, etc., or self-employed are in that, you know, a difficult position where often they are responsible possibly for others, but they've also got the added worry of their own personal finance. And what we're hearing more and more is you know, as an impact of COVID, personal finances have been impacted, especially if you've got unlimited liability. And what we do offer is we fund debt advice. It's called Business Debt Line. Again, I can share the link, and this is free advice for business owners, and they can often explore kind of tricky issues where personal finances are intertwined with business debts, and that's quite complicated, whereby, you know, just generic money advice wouldn't really touch on that. But our Business Debt Line, yeah, definitely that's something for you to access as a self-employed person. And it might not even, you know, it's not because you're currently in debt, but you're forward planning, thinking, you know what, I've got some kind of tricky road ahead. I need to proactively look at what my situation is and what support is available. So definitely draw on that service as well.
Great, thank you. Last couple of questions here. Next one, Sarah, this one might be useful for yourself, and it's from a colleague, a member of staff, who said that they are trying to speak to their senior managers about offering sort of financial support to their colleagues, but there's concern from the top that they're giving finance advice and not qualified to do so. How can this member, our guest today, best sort of influence up?
I think it is about the business case, and I think Colleen mentioned that they've got some tools on the Money and Pension Service website about making that business case as to why it's important to look at both the financial well-being and, from our perspective, I guess, the mental well-being within an organisation as well. There's lots of stats out there about the impact of not doing something, which, you know, gives you the case for doing something. In terms of the concerns about the regulation, is that, do you take from that question that the senior staff members are concerned that junior staff members are giving advice and it's not regulated?
It reads to me that the business shouldn't be giving financial advice.
Yeah, well, yeah. So financial advice has a particular definition, and yeah, some financial advice and sort of debt advice is a regulated activity, regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Sort of money guidance, so just basic information about things like budgeting, is not. So there is a camp where you can give some information, and there's a camp where you can't. I think, again, using tools available from the Money and Pension Service will probably reassure your senior managers, because yeah, that's all sort of checked and vetted, if you like, in terms of it being appropriate information to provide.
Yeah, just to echo that, you know, we get a lot of requests from employers, and they're very risk averse, and, you know, rightfully so, thinking that if they start doing financial well-being, it means that people are going to randomly start saying, oh, you should take out a loan, you should do that. And as Sarah said, there's a big difference between regulated advice and money guidance. So a financial well-being strategy is not about giving, probably not even giving money guidance. It's about signposting, providing the tools from, you know, those kind of sources, that those regulated sources, etc., for them people to be able to make their own choices about things. So any employer kind of not wanting to get involved with financial well-being because that is their worry, that shouldn't be a worry, because that's not really what it's about.
Lots of scope for employers to get involved in this space and not feel too concerned about the support that they're giving. I won't call it advice for exactly the reason you just described. And then the final question, which I'm not sure who's this one's best placed to, but I might fire it to Sarah first. It's again from another person who's listening in today, saying, if a person has mental health problems and they're worried about their money, should I signpost them to their GP?
Well, if they're struggling with their mental health, then primary care is generally the first port of call. So, you know, that's not going to be a bad thing to do. There could be other avenues, such as an employee assistance program, that you can, depending on where you live, often self-refer or signpost somebody to, like a psychological therapy service. So, yeah, someone getting support for their mental health is important. And if you can start to feel better and get support and treatment for your mental health, then you're going to be in a better place to be able to deal with a money issue. But I would say, you know, dealing with it in a pincer approach is important. So it is also important to seek some support and signpost somebody for help for their money issue as well. So all the tools that we've mentioned, the Money Helper website, mentalhealthandmoneyadvice.org, places like National Debtline and Step Change, they've got masses of information on their website about money issues. And there's an array of sources like Mental Health UK for advice on the mental health issues. So a signpost is never going to be harmful. And yeah, but I would say a pincer approach if they are struggling with both issues.
Super, thank you ever so much. I think we've managed to get round pretty much everything that people wanted to talk about us today, which is excellent. But just as a reminder to everybody who's listening in today, we will be sending around this recording a little bit later on this afternoon, along with all of the resources that Carleen and Sarah have talked about. But I've no doubt if you wanted to pick up the conversation with either of them further, you can find them on LinkedIn or pick up with us at Mental Health UK through our website. We're going to be taking a break from our webinar series for August to allow everybody to truly revel in the Day of Freedom, whether that's for next Monday for people in England or a little bit further down the line elsewhere in the country. And we'll be coming back in September to talk specifically about suicide prevention, where I'll be speaking to our very own Chief Executive, Brian Dow, who is also the co-chair of the National Suicide Prevention Alliance, amongst some other guest speakers, which will be lining up over the summer break. Everybody who's taking part in the webinar today will be signed up to our newsletter. So when that webinar becomes available, you'll have the link on there and you'll be able to sign up and join us again then. So in the meantime, thank you very much to both of my guest speakers, to Carleen and to Sarah. It's been an excellent session again today. I wish everybody a fantastic summer. I really do hope you get the opportunity to go out, give yourself a bit of a break, and to certainly enjoy the good weather that I'm having here in London this week at the very least. And we'll see you again in a couple of months' time. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.